The Wild Pussycat is an unsung classic of exploitation cinema. Produced in Greece in 1968, it was not officially released there until 1972, and then only in a cut and compromised version. The simple plot concerns a woman whose sister was exploited and driven to suicide by a sleazy pimp. In order to get revenge on him, the woman seduces the man, drugs him, and imprisons him in a soundproof room, tormenting him through a large one-way mirror. He can see out, no one can see in. By performing sultry striptease dances and having love with men and women, while he can only look on, helpless to stop it or join in. Her final revenge on him is so shocking, it raises eyebrows even today. When good girl Nadia investigates her sister's death, she finds out that sadistic pimp Nick is behind it all. So she straps on the leather and whip and beat him at his own games. Greece, the cradle of democracy. Although, after watching Dimis Dadiras, The Wild Pussycat from 1969, probably lean more toward the cradle of health. Cause stick me in chains and pour a cheap black and white label bottle of ouzo over me. This was one very down and dirty Greek film for real. Nick the Pimp is one bad mofo. But being a bad mofo comes with a price. See Nick owes. And Nick owes all over town. To make ends, Nick enlists the services of the love of his life Vera and shoves her out to every slob he owes coin to. With every cinematic trick and drop in the book, director Dimis Dadiras fully establishes that Nick the Pimp is an A-class mafia and certainly does not deserve the devotion he gets from good girl Vera. Good girl Vera, who is now preggers, tired of being used, abused, and treated like dirt, has finally reached the bottom of the tzatziki bowl. After being thrown out of her apartment by Nick, Vera succumbs to depression and throws herself headlong in oncoming traffic. When hot chick Maria arrives on the scene to investigate her sister Vera's death, she works out via Vera's diary that Nick the Pimp was behind her death. So Maria seeks revenge. How? By smoking and taking her clothes off. Constantly so many cigarettes, so much nudity, so much sweat, the hair, the cloth, the alcohol, the body, the music, the toe sucking. Now there is a flick currently playing in cinemas by a director who has inserted foot fetish scene throughout his films, going to publicly go on record to confirm that after 9 films, this director should probably watch The Wild Pussycat to learn how that shit is really done. Look in the mirror at what you have become. A young woman commits suicide after coming home to find her boyfriend with another woman. Her sister gets a hold of her diary and pieces together the story of the boyfriend's abuse of her sister and decide to get revenge. She entices him up to her home and then drugs him and chains him up in a soundproof room. Then things get weird. Like the Deserter, which is a bonus feature of the Mondo Macabro release of this film. The Wild Pussycat is shot in high contrast black and white, and it's absolutely gorgeous. There are two versions of the film on the disc. The domestic Greek version, which introduces a subplot involving a drug investigation, and the more controversial export version. Watch the domestic first, but both versions are interesting yet different. It depends on your mood which you will prefer. Fed up with his old girlfriend Vera, Michael is the ruthless leader of an international drug smuggling ring. Shows her the door. When her sister Maria finds Vera's diary, well-hidden secret of abuse, humiliation and prostitution come to light. As a result, unable to forgive and forget, seductive Maria embarks on a furious mission to get even, weaving an elaborate web of revenge, degradation and pitiless punishment. Now there is no turning back. How sweet is the taste of vengeance. The Alamo Draft House in Austin presented The Wild Pussycat, a '68 Greek exploitation movie that superseded everyone's expectations. The performances were perfectly overwrought and weird, and the melodrama was high, but in this very stylized, syrupy way. This movie did love and sadism wrestling with one another in a way that's seen a lot of other films attempt but fail. And clearly other directors have seen this one. According to Kiarla Janesi, Jody Amato remade this one as an Emmanuel movie with some very minor changes. At some point it's worth seeing, provided of course you can cope with sick Greek S&M revenge movies. But otherwise, why would you be looking for information about it now? This 1968 Greek exploitation film is one of those rare cases of brilliant direction that looks pretty goofy. It's an overwrought tale of a weak-minded woman who loves her man so much that she allows him to pimp her out, among other degradation. When he kicks her out of his life, she kills herself. The meat of the movie is the revenge that the girl's sister carries out, told in partial flashback. The sister is reading the deceased diary throughout. This black and white film is one of those great emotional European films that shows Americans how to passionately smoke cigarette and scream like an animal when the situation warrants it. It's a simple movie, but that's a big part of the charm. It's like a snapshot of a time and place that leaves you feeling like wearing beetle boot and drinking whiskey. Micheles was an unscrupulous individual who sold drugs, and therefore he didn't really know the feeling of love. And he simply kicked out his mistress, who endured all his antics. The girl, due to her young age and the unfulfillment of her own personality, did not consider anything more suitable than to throw herself under the wheel of a car. And of course she died. Michalis greedily plunges into a relationship with a luxurious woman whom he met in a bar, and one day finds himself chained in the basement. The woman who took him prisoner was the sister of the deceased girl, and having read her diary, decided to commit an act of revenge. The film follows a young woman who lost her sister recently. She killed herself after she was in an abusive relationship with a man. He was cheating on her and was often physically and emotionally abusive to her, which was the reason she took her life. She planned her revenge on the man. She lured him back to her place and drugged him. She then put him in a room and chained him up like a dog with a two-way mirror. He can see out, but no one can see in. He is then subject to her powers act, with no way of touching her or satisfying himself. The movie was way too slow, with no atmosphere and a story you could see coming. Out of the Mondo Macabro release in Marathon, this was the weakest one. Was hoping that The Wild Pussycat would take back to a more enjoyable release, but the film could barely hold attention. Wanted to like it, but just couldn't. The acting in this one is strange. Yet every culture or society has different ways of doing things, but the acting in this film is just odd. The characters make eye contact briefly before their eye bounces around like they are high on speed. The dialogue has no emotion behind them, and the scenes are painfully dry. Even the scenes that are meant to be lovely fall flat because the cast has no dedication to their role. The story for this one moves at a snail pace and does not have the effect on the viewer that was intended. The movie tried to be lovely while flirting with being a thriller, but all it really does is put the viewer to sleep. The love scenes are so underwhelming that you may get the impression that this is a parody. If you can make it through this film in one sitting, will be thoroughly impressed. Finally, if you want blood and gore, you won't find it here. The film is a character piece that rely heavily on the characters' interaction. Overall, The Wild Pussycat is not the film was expecting. A huge fan of exploitation and was expecting a fun exploitation flick. Instead, get something else that just wasn't for us.